Now that Lightfall has been out for a few days, I've seen a lot of discussion of its main campaign, but I haven't seen as much talk about my favorite mission. It's probably because it's pretty deep into the expansion's post-game content, but I want more people to know about it. I love Partition Hard Reset and think it's one of the best missions I've ever played in a Destiny game. This video will be discussing Lightfall's post-campaign content, particularly the Hall of Heroes questline where we learn about the history of past cloudstriders, so if you care about spoilers for that, you should probably wait to watch this video until you've reached the beginning of the Strider exotic quest. Seriously, Partition Hard Reset is amazing. Go do the Monument quest so that you can play this incredible mission. After the campaign of Lightfall, the player is given several quest lines that explore Neomuna's past, present, and future. After going through a guided tour of the Hall of Heroes at the end of the campaign, the Guardian discovers that several monuments to Neomuna's past cloudstriders have been destroyed by the Vex. Because of a psychic connection to one of the cloudstriders, the Guardian accidentally rebuilds one of the monuments. This prompts Neomuna's archivist Quinn Ligari to send the Guardian on a series of quests to relive the history of the cloudstriders in order to rebuild the remaining monuments. Each quest works sequentially backwards by restoring memories of progressively older cloudstriders and finishes with the final quest, which is about the first cloudstrider. I actually dislike this questline quite a bit because while the story is very interesting, the gameplay is slow and frustrating. The player needs to complete activities in the Neomuna patrol space to clear most of these quests. I don't particularly dislike being on patrol, but some of the quest requirements are best described as arduous. This is especially made more frustrating by the beefed up difficulty of the Neomuna patrol zone, where most enemies are close to the power cap, which most players doing this quest will not have reached yet. I don't particularly dislike the added difficulty in Neomuna patrol and think it livens up the patrol experience a lot because it was pretty boring due to a lack of difficulty in previous expansions. However, some of the quest steps are ridiculously grindy, particularly the Maelstrom quest, which has a step that requires the player to stay in Li Ming Harbor for an extended time. The quest requires completing patrols, public events, and communing with strand sources in the area. The strand communion requirements are fine as you only need to commune with 2 sources, but the patrol and public event requirements are ridiculous. Completing a single patrol only grants 4% progress. Completing a public event grants a similar amount. I'm not exactly sure what the progression is for heroics, but I would estimate completing a heroic patrol or heroic public event grants something like 7 or 8%, which is a bit insulting. I had to spend more than an hour grinding patrols and public events in this single section of the patrol zone to finish the quest step, which was very tedious. It's not currently possible to complete this step without repeating patrols or public events, which is annoying and defeats the intended purpose of getting the player to explore the patrol zone. This should be fixed by increasing the progress granted by patrols and public events. 10 to 15% for a normal patrol or public event, and 25 to 30% for a heroic public event or patrol would be far more reasonable. The reason I'm focusing on Maelstrom is it was the most egregious example of the grind required for the monument quests. Knowing how annoying it was helps put you in the mindset I was in when I got to the Bluejay quest, the cloudstrider preceding Maelstrom. I was so frustrated that I logged off of Destiny for the night after finishing Maelstrom, and was wary of the possible grind Bluejay would require. The next day I started working on Bluejay, which requires killing more Vex in the current Vex incursion zone, which of course was Li Ming Harbor. This step isn't as long as Maelstrom, but I dreaded returning to that god-forsaken harbor. Upon finally completing the Vex portion, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the next activity wasn't patrol-based. It was a mission called Partition Hard Reset. After figuring out a loadout to handle the barrier and overload champions, I went into the mission solo and loved the experience. Side note, I want to mention that I absolutely adore the new methods to stun champions with class verbs. They make champion loadouts a lot less of a hassle. Like the legendary campaign, Partition Hard Reset has contest mode activated, meaning the enemies are 15 levels over the player's current power level. This provides an extra combat challenge and requires the player to be a lot more careful than a regular campaign mission. The mission takes place in the Vex network, where Nimbus has discovered Shadow Legion forces that are trying to destroy Cloud Arc data. The data in question is the original code written for the inhabitants of Neomuna by Maya Sundaresh of the Ishtar Collective. This ties Neomuna into a long-running storyline in Destiny lore that dates all the way back to the original Destiny 1 Grimoire cards. A Golden Age era researcher named Maya Sundaresh and her coworkers at the Ishtar Collective were studying the Vex on Venus when they discovered that the Vex had made dozens of simulated copies of each researcher in order to understand the Ishtar Collective. These simulated copies explored the Vex network for years to, in turn, learn to understand the Vex. Now that we know the Cloud Arc's virtual reality for Neomuna's inhabitants is based off of Vex network technology, it's easy to make the inference that the simulated copies of Maya and her wife Chioma were probably involved in the construction of Neomuna. I love this connection because I've been fascinated by this particular story thread and have been surprised by how many places it's turned up over the years as I read through Destiny's lore. It's terrifying to imagine that the simulated copies of the researchers are fully conscious copies of those people. It makes me wonder if the Vex have copies of me somewhere in their network who are all fully self-aware. Would they know they were in a simulation? What if all of Destiny is just a Vex simulation? It makes for horrifying and fantastic writing. In Partition Hard Reset, the Guardian races against the clock to defuse bombs planted by the Shadow Legion and prevent them from destroying the data. The mission's main new mechanic is the bomb timers and the way the Guardian reaches them by traversing a Sparrow course complete with speed boost ramps. The Sparrow portions are somewhat similar to the Grasp of Avarice Sparrow encounter, but I like them a lot more than Grasp of Avarice because they're broken up by combat sections. Each time the player completes a Sparrow section or kills enemies in the Vex network, the time they have to defuse the next bomb is increased. I love that the race against the clock encourages a speedrun mentality, something Bungie has really leaned into in Lightfall with the other features like the headlong strand time trials. I would consider myself a better than average Destiny player, but I'm no speedrun expert. With the fastest Sparrow in the game, no time to explain, I had no problem with the timer, so the clock never reached 0 a single time in the mission for me. I had more difficulty with the combat sections of the mission, and I would be lying if I didn't say that accidentally falling off the map because my Sparrow got going a bit faster than I could handle was also not a problem. The Sparrow sections definitely have Rainbow Road from Mario Kart vibes. I think it would be super cool if there was a time trial version of the mission, kind of like the headlong time trial, where it encourages you to start over and keep resetting until you get a faster time. This would encourage players to push the mission to the max. I know there's already a triumph for beating the mission in under 7 minutes, so that's gonna be pretty hard to begin with. After defusing 3 bombs, the player has to complete a boss fight. The boss is a Shadow Legion Colossus that fires guided air missiles at the player. The fight has 3 phases and requires the player to take their Sparrow to defuse bombs after the first 2 phases. I loved the boss fight and found it a really fun challenge. The mission as a whole benefits from being set in the Vex network, which has incredible Tron-inspired neon visuals that make me feel like I'm inside a cyberpunk computer. The designers and artists at Bungie who created Partition Hard Reset should get raises because they made an incredible level. I'm also a little annoyed because you can only replay the mission once a week. I would love for this requirement to be dropped so that players could speedrun the mission over and over to push it to the absolute limit. Overall, Partition Hard Reset is an excellent and addictive mission that has an awesome story, visuals, and gameplay, making it one of the best in the Destiny franchise. For those who've played the mission, I'm curious to see what you thought of it. Do you agree with my opinions? What strategies did you use to speedrun it? My name is eforme. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.